Hi, my name is Elizabeth Gunter, and this is my signature project 2, The Effects of Standardized Testing Skills on Student Achievement. The purpose of this research proposal is to determine the extent to which teaching standardized testing skills in the classroom affects student achievement. I have not yet implemented this study. Research and data shows that students are not meeting state standards on standardized tests. This may be because students are not being taught standardized testing skills at school in order to prepare for standardized tests. Research shows that test preparation positively affects educational test scores. This data table shows the Alabama Comprehensive Assessment Program, or ACAP, test results for grades 3rd through 8th of students in Alabama for the spring of 2021. The data table reveals only half of Alabama students scored proficient in reading, and less than a quarter reached the proficient level in math. Table 1 shows the iStation Indicators of Progress, or ISIP, benchmark assessment subtest percentile rankings in reading, and Table 2 shows the iStation ISIP subtest percentile rankings in math for the 6th grade students at Enterprise Early Education Center from September of 2021. Table 1 shows over half the 6th grade students scored below the 40th percentile in 4 out of 5 categories on the ISIP reading test. Table 2 shows over half the 6th grade students scored below the 40th percentile in 5 out of 5 categories on the ISIP math test. Students performing at or below the 20th percentile are considered in need of urgent intervention. Students performing at the 21st to 40th percentile are considered below average. Students participating in the iStation ISIP assessment must score in the 41st to 60th percentile range or higher to be considered on target for their grade level. Based on the data from Table 1 and Table 2, the 6th grade students at Enterprise Early Education Center are scoring below the targeted level in reading and mathematics. In the United States, standardized testing is used as an integral component for evaluating student achievement and the quality of education students receive. If standardized testing is a part of our educational society and valuable information may be obtained from testing, educators should incorporate testing skills into their instructional practices so their students can achieve higher on standardized tests. A study conducted by Sanchez and Cruz for ACT found that test preparation through single programs within schools positively affected student performance. Students who are prepared for tests achieve higher on tests. Lack of test preparation and test readiness can also lead to increased anxiety in students that can cause a debilitative cognitive state. By acquiring the necessary testing strategies and skills, students can adequately recall and utilize their learned information. The best way to support student achievement on standardized tests is to help students be prepared. When students have the necessary testing strategies and skills, students can adequately retain and retrieve learned information to increase academic performance and achievement. The population for this research will be 85 6th grade students attending Enterprise Early Education Center. The 85 students are divided into 4 classes ranging 21 students per class. Participants will range from 11 to 12 years old. For this study, students will be chosen through a convenience sample, meaning the sample is chosen through a non-probability method. The convenience sample for this experiment will keep the 6th grade students in regular classes on their regular schedules. The 4 classes are split into 2 groups. Each group shares 2 teachers. The 2 intact groups will randomly be assigned to an experimental or control group. The 4 6th grade teachers at Enterprise Early Education Center will be chosen through voluntary participation for this study. The control group will be taught traditional methods in their classroom setting. The experimental group will receive training and instruction on test preparation strategies in their classroom setting. iStation's Indicators of Progress, or ISIP, will be utilized for this study. iStation's ISIP is a standardized computerized adaptive test that measures students' reading and mathematics ability and skill development. Test questions are assigned a numeric value based on difficulty level, and final scores range from 0 to 600 points. iStation's ISIP testing is proven valid and effective based on data collected from independent and scientific research studies and iStation's applicability to current learning standards. In determining iStation's ISIP test-retest reliability, Pearson product moment correlation coefficients between ISIP administrations were calculated. Based on the calculation results, data insinuates exceptionally high levels of internal consistency in the areas of sub-test ability scores and the total aptitude scores. The 3 intervention strategies for this study are individualized goal setting, practice tests, and chunking segmenting reading passages. Through teacher-led instruction, students will create a personal reading and mathematics goal on an area they would like to improve based on data collected from their most recent ISIP scores. The students will write their goals on a goal chart that will be placed in their classrooms so that students can monitor progress towards their goals. Teachers will incorporate chunking or segmenting techniques for reading assignments with lengthy passages. Practice tests will be created and implemented to support students in preparing for mathematics and reading tests or assignments during the 4-week intervention period. Students in the control group will be exposed to their regularly scheduled lessons and activities. Collaborative resources needed for this study will be discussed with the superintendent, the principal, and the 6th grade teachers included in the study. Enterprise Early Education Center will mainly provide the necessary resources for this study. These resources will consist of access to iStation, Chromebooks for testing, paper for consent and assent forms, pencil, copy machine, computer for data analysis entry, and lesson plans. The funding for additional resources provided by the school will come from the individual teacher funds. This project should start in August 2022. Preparation for this intervention should be completed in about 3 weeks. This will give the researcher time to obtain the necessary consent and assent forms and to provide the participating teachers with the appropriate trainings to implement the interventions. The intervention itself will take place over 4 weeks, so the total timeline will be 7 weeks from preparation to completion. On the first day of intervention, all 6th grade students in the experimental and control groups will participate in the iStation ISIP pre-test in reading and math. Immediately following the pre-test, students in the intervention group will begin the intervention strategies discussed on slide 10. On the Friday of the 4th consecutive week, all students in the intervention and control group will participate in the iStation ISIP post-test in math and reading. Before conducting the study, all appropriate consent and assent will be collected. The teachers for the 6th grade students participating in the intervention group will receive instruction and training on implementing personal goal-setting strategies with their students. Additionally, teachers will receive goal charts to track their personal goals for their classrooms. They will also receive instruction and materials to implement practice tests aligned with the instructional goals and on teaching students to chunk lengthy reading passages to support reading comprehension. Next, the experimental and control group will randomly be selected. Then, all students will participate in the ISIP pre-test in reading and math. After the pretest, students in the experimental group will be exposed to the intervention strategies of personal goal setting, practice tests, and chunking strategies for 4 consecutive weeks. Teachers in the experimental group will document how they incorporated these interventions into daily lessons. At the end of the 4 weeks, the experimental and control groups will be re-administered with the iStation ISIP test in reading and math. Possible threats to internal validity include attrition and researcher bias. Attrition occurs when participants leave a study before its completion. To avoid participants exiting the study before its completion, students and teachers participating in the study will receive incentives during and upon completing the study, such as candy, pizza parties, and homework passes. Researcher bias occurs when data is analyzed subjectively. To avoid the researcher's perspective influencing the study's outcomes, the researcher will maintain detailed records of the data used in the study. The researcher will only use data collected in the study to determine the study results. A possible threat to external validity is selection bias. Selection bias occurs when a researcher fails to obtain proper randomization in their samplings. To prevent researcher bias, this research will randomly select an experimental and control group from a convenient sample. To assure the confidentiality of participants, several methods will be used. Each participant will be assigned a number from 1 through 85. The ID will only match the participant's name in the researcher's records. All persons reviewing the participant data will have access only to the identification number. All data will be secured. Consent forms will be distributed to the superintendent, administrator, and parents or guardians of the students participating in the study. Signed consent forms will explain the purpose, benefits, and potential risks of the study. The consent forms will also explain that the study is strictly voluntary. The consent forms will be signed and collected from all participating students before the study begins. The students participating in this study will all be minors. Therefore, students who volunteer for the study will be asked to sign a student assent form. To gain approval by the Institutional Review Board, or IRB, I submitted an example of my letter of consent for administrative superintendent approval for conducting the study, an example of my parent consent form, and a copy of my student assent form. Special populations need to be considered during the intervention process. Students who are English language learners or students with IEPs or 504 plans should have their individualized learning plans and accommodations followed during the pre-test and post-test administration. Students with special needs may need support from an EL or special education teacher during the intervention phase to provide one-on-one or small group instruction on chunking strategies. Personal goal setting and using practice tests. This study should also consider the socioeconomic status and opportunity or achievement gaps in participating students. The researcher has determined that the instruments and interventions used in this study are not culturally biased. One of the limitations this research potentially faces is corresponding teacher participation. If the teachers that are implementing the intervention do not follow through with the necessary steps, or they do not implement the intervention at all, the study will not yield true results. Another limitation to the study may be the short intervention timeline. The pre-test, post-test data may not show significant results if the intervention period is too short. For this study, one of the main expected results is for there to be an increase in student achievement in the ISIP standardized tests. By teaching students test-taking skills and strategies, students are expected to show growth in reading and mathematics. I expect test scores to increase by 50 to 100 points per subtest. I expect the students in the traditional setting to have scores that increase by 20 to 40 points, which is the typical growth range in ISIP. Another expected result from this study should be an increase in overall test-taking abilities. The students participating in the study should be able to apply personal goal-setting, chunking strategies, and the importance of practice tests into all aspects of their academic careers and future tests. The next steps would be to gain the appropriate consent and assent. That must be done before any other steps can be initiated. Next, the study needs to be presented to the 6th grade teachers and students at EEC. The students and teachers should receive a presentation of the study, the benefits, and their responsibilities if they choose to participate. Finally, the researchers should also be prepared for any setbacks or changes to the intervention. One change to this action plan could be to focus on one content area instead of two. The intervention strategies may target only reading or only math. This would focus the research. Another change could be to have the entire 6th grade as the experimental group and compare their testing data to another grade level. This would be beneficial because the experimental pool would be larger, so more data can be collected. A final change to the action plan would be to increase the intervention time. 4 weeks may not be enough time to properly implement the intervention strategies, so the timeline may need to be adjusted and increased to obtain more accurate results. One contribution the study could make is that if this study reveals that teaching testing skills in the classroom does in fact increase academic performance, then researchers may want to explore what testing strategies yield the best results. A second contribution would be to ask the question of how often should teachers incorporate testing skills in their lessons and for how long. Additional research can show the effects of teaching testing skills over different lengths of time and then compare the results to determine how long testing skills should be taught prior to a test. Additional research could be conducted to determine if students perform better on standardized tests when they are given at different times of the day. If a student tests better in the afternoon than the morning, should a student be allowed to test in the afternoon? A final thought would be, what impact does standardized tests have on student morale and self-esteem? I think this is an interesting topic to research because it poses the question of whether or not standardized tests are more harmful than helpful to students. The next 2 slides show my references that I used for this project. Thank you so much.